Hi, this is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at Waterman Harmonious Green. I'll do a writing sample on 52 GSM Tomoe River paper using a variety of pens and nib sizes, ranging from a Pilot Extra Fine to a Bexley 18 karat stub nib. I may or may not have the variety of writing samples that I usually do because I had a little accident with my ink sample. So I'll have the writing sample on Tomoe River. I already have a writing sample on Rhodia. This is the writing sample that I normally use for my water resistance test. So I'll have my water resistance test at the end of the video. And if I have enough ink to do the other writing samples, like the ink collection card and the copy paper, I'll have those also. I'll compare Harmonious Green to similar green inks from my collection, and I'll have a water resistance test and a chromatography. When I did the writing sample with my glass dip nib, initially the ink comes off the nib very quickly, but soon after that, the ink begins to come off more uniformly and is very enjoyable to write with. When I made the swatches with my tweezers, the ink went down on the paper and made a very crisp, uniform line on each of the papers that I tried it on. There wasn't a whole lot of difference in how dark the ink was from the beginning of the swatch to the end, but there was a little bit of halo. And you can see here at the drip at the end of the swatch, you may not be able to see the color, but that halo looks almost like a dark blue. And on wet writing like you get with the glass dip nib, you can see a bit of that halo on the letters as well. Gives the writing some really nice character. I'm going to begin with my Pilot Kakuno. It has an extra fine stainless steel nib. On this very smooth Tomoe River paper, in this is one of my older Hobonichi planners that has the really nice Tomoe River paper. This extra fine nib was very smooth, and the ink is very crisp and very legible. This was very pleasant. Next, I've got a Leonardo Momento Zero. It has a Yovo elastic fine nib. That was very pleasant. It's putting down quite a bit more ink than the Pilot Extra Fine, but part of that is the bounciness of this elastic nib, and part of it is that this is a Yovo Extra Fine nib, so it's going to be a bit wider. It was very smooth. Now, this is a replacement nib that I got from Goulet Pens, but it's an Edison nib, so I don't know if they specially tune these replacement nibs. I'm sure they do. Edison is well known for their excellent nibs, so this was also very enjoyable to write with. Next, I'll be writing with a Pilot Custom 74. It has a 14 karat fine nib. kind of surprising how wet this is compared to the others, especially since the upstroke is so much drier. But I guess when you think about it, when you're making an X, no upstroke is involved. And because those upstrokes, and it looks like the strokes that you make to the right are a little bit drier, the writing has some spots that are a bit lighter, and so the overall writing comes out looking a little bit lighter. But still, it was very pleasant to write with, very enjoyable, very smooth. This Pilot Fine nib is better suited for these smaller grids. Next, I'll be writing with my Parker Premier. It has an 18 karat medium nib. Now, I have had trouble with this nib when I was using other inks, that I felt like I had to press a bit harder to get the ink to flow properly. This one, not at all. No trouble with any hard starts. I didn't have to exert any kind of pressure at all. I could just write with a really light touch. It was kind of surprising. And I really like the way the ink looks out of this nib. I'm getting that halo effect, like I mentioned up here with the glass dip nib. Very nice. I didn't put my smiley face on the Pilot Custom 74. I better do that. I don't want to refer back to it in the future and think that I didn't like it. Next, I'll be writing with a Kaweco Lilliput. It has a stainless steel double broad nib. Just the slightest hint of feedback. I probably wouldn't even notice it if I hadn't written with some of these other nibs that were so much smoother, like the Parker Premier was very smooth. This Kaweco double broad just has the slightest hint of feedback, and I really like that. It gives it a velvety or buttery feel, and it makes it feel very luxurious when you're writing. And finally, I've got my Bexley sleeve filler. It has an 18 karat stub nib. I was afraid of that. I did have a bit of a hard start, and that's the reason I wanted to test this ink with this nib. I've had trouble in the past with hard starts, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when I go over the inks. And I like to use this as a reverse writer sometimes, but with this ink, it's just dry enough that, to me, the ink is a bit too pale. I like this bolder color when it puts down more ink. But in a pinch, if you need a drier or a more narrow line, this could be helpful. Let me do my, oh, look at that. Look how wet it writes. But I've always had trouble with this nib. It dries out so easily. I've had trouble with my vintage Estabrooks drying out with some inks, but when I put Waterman Mysterious Blue in them, I have no trouble at all. I know a lot of people like to use Waterman Serenity Blue in pens that they're having trouble with, but I've had no trouble with the Mysterious Blue, and I like the color of it. And I was hoping Harmonious Green, with it being a Waterman ink. Look at that. Well, I know this nib initially had baby's bottom, and I was able to work with it a little bit and get it writing better. But I still had trouble with some less serious hard starts, but still aggravating. But with all of these other writing samples, they were just, on this Tomoe River paper, they were excellent. Let's take a look at the writing sample on Rhodia paper. Let me discuss it. On this little Rhodia writing sample, the Bexley sleeve filler, that stub nib, was just so enjoyable to write with. Again, the reverse writing was a bit too dry. It didn't feel bad. It just looks too pale to me. The Kaweco double broad on this Rhodia paper felt a little more, I wouldn't say a little more feedbacky, maybe a little more dry, but not to the point that it was unpleasant. I had written with this really wet stub nib first, and so this didn't feel as enjoyable. It was a little bit drier. The Parker Premier medium felt really nice on this paper. Initially, I had to, on this first P, I had to exert a little more pressure, but if you notice on the Pilot, I had to do the same thing. Look how wispy the P is on the Pilot. I think it was because I had inked it up so recently. The Pilot Kakuno felt a little more dry than the others, wasn't as enjoyable. But then when I tried the Leonardo Momento Zero with that elastic extra fine, that was really nice. Now, one thing I want to mention, all of these pens are just dipped in the ink except for the Watermans. I have actually inked up the ink sac because I was wanting to test long term how it did. But I was having so much fun doing these writing samples. I was writing with the Momento Zero, and I had the cap setting up here right beside the open ink sample. And when I went to grab the cap, I grabbed the ink sample instead, and I was getting ready to cap my pen with the ink sample and poured it all over my lap, all over my hands, poured out most of the ink sample. And this was the first time I had used this. This was a full ink sample. So that was very disappointing because I'm really enjoying this ink. Okay, now Waterman Harmonious Green, whenever I look at it, and even when I look at it in the vial, I see just a hint of blue to it. It's got a slight minty green color to it, but still leans more heavily to the green. I feel like it's similar to Iroshizuku Shinryoku. Shinryoku may have a little less blue to it and looks like it might be a bit more saturated. Harmonious Green has more of that halo effect to it. Kaweco Palm Green is my favorite green, and it has less blue. It has a little bit more yellow to it, and it's a darker, more saturated green. Lamy Peridot is very similar, though it might have a bit more blue, and it appears to be a bit more saturated. California Teal is very similar, but looking at the swatch, it looks like it's also a bit more saturated. And Monteverde Yosemite Green looks very similar in like the brightness that it has. All right, I was able to do the writing sample on my copy paper. Bleeds through a little bit to the back, as can be expected with copy paper. It's unusual, but there are some inks that don't bleed through, but this isn't one of them. However, as I was writing with this, I thought, oh, these wetter pens are probably going to feel unpleasant. They're going to feel too wet. The ink will look blobby, but it didn't. Like the Bexley sleeve filler, doesn't look blobby at all. The pen wrote uniformly and it was very pleasant. The Kaweco felt a hint of dryness, but not unpleasant. It was fine. I wrote in reverse with the Bexley sleeve filler up here, and it was more pale, but it wasn't unpleasant. So that's something you could do, and it didn't bleed through. So that's something you can do if you have poor quality paper. The Parker Premier, even though it was nice and wet, didn't feel unpleasant and didn't look blobby. It looks really nice. Now the drier nibs, they felt dry and they weren't that pleasant. The Leonardo Memento Zero felt a little dry, so I gave it. It wasn't sad, it wasn't happy. It was just, if you had to use it, fine. But it wasn't a pen and ink combination or a pen, ink, and paper combination that you would look forward to using. But on a better quality paper, I did like that elastic extra fine nib. Okay, I'm going to go do the water resistance test. I'm going to dip this writing sample in water for 10 minutes and see if anything sticks around. Okay, in the water resistance test I did, you can see there was a water-resistant blue component to this ink that I would classify this as not quite legible. In some of the writing samples, the broader ones, you can read it a little bit, but overall I would classify this as not legible, not really water-resistant, and not really, it has a water-resistant component, but not enough of one to be legible. I love the chromatography of this ink. You can see that water-resistant component stuck here at the bottom. And then I love the complexity of this ink. You can see there's like a bright, I think that's considered a cerulean blue. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but you can see that blue component separating from a yellow, and you can see that beautiful green where they overlap. I really love complex inks like this, and you can tell in the writing sample, I'm usually, green is a beautiful color, but I prefer darker green inks for writing. I don't really prefer to write with bright colored inks, but this one you could see the complexity in the writing samples when you put down a good amount of ink, and you can see in the chromatography where that complexity comes from. Okay, I am glad that this ink was so enjoyable to write with concerning the mess that I made. I had ink that I had to clean up off my carpet down below here. I'm telling you, the ink went everywhere. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.